The Path Not Taken, Chapter 1. My life has been a series of choices, some small and seemingly insignificant, others monumental, shaping the very landscape of my existence. At 68, looking back, there is one choice that stands out, a fork in the road that led me down a path I have walked for over 40 years, always with the ghost of the other path lingering in my peripheral vision. It was a choice made under pressure, guided by expectation, a decision that felt right at the time, but whose weight has settled in my heart over the decades. My name is Eleanor. I live a comfortable, quiet life. I married young to a good, reliable man named Thomas. We had 2 wonderful children, built a solid home, and lived a life that by all accounts was respectable and fulfilling. Thomas was a loving husband and father, and I cherished our family. But there was always a part of me, a small, silent part, that wondered about the path not taken, about the life I might have lived if I had made a different choice. The choice was about Daniel. We met in college in the late 1970s. He was everything I wasn't, passionate, a little wild, with dreams of traveling the world, living a life of adventure, far removed from the expectations of my conservative, small-town family. We fell deeply in love, a whirlwind romance that felt like something out of a movie. We talked about running away together, about seeing the world, about living a life unbound by convention. But my family had different expectations. They envisioned a different future for me, a stable marriage, a comfortable life in our town, following the traditional path. Daniel, with his restless spirit and uncertain future, did not fit into their vision. There were pressures, quiet disapprovals, subtle urgings towards a more suitable match. And then Thomas entered the picture, kind, steady, with a secure future in the family business. He was everything my parents approved of, and he loved me in a quiet, steadfast way that felt safe and reliable. I was torn. My heart yearned for Daniel and the adventurous life we dreamed of. My head and the weight of my family's expectations pulled me towards Thomas and the security he offered. It was a choice between passion and stability, between following my heart's wild call and fulfilling the duty I felt towards my family, towards the future they envisioned for me. In the end, I chose stability. I chose Thomas. It wasn't a lack of love for Daniel, but a fear of disappointing my family, a fear of the unknown, a feeling that I couldn't or shouldn't defy the path that seemed laid out for me. I broke Daniel's heart, and in doing so, I broke a piece of my own. Daniel left town shortly after, his dreams of traveling the world, now solo adventures. I heard snippets about him over the years, that he had indeed traveled extensively, lived in different countries, pursued his passions. His life sounded exciting, fulfilling, everything we had dreamed of together. I married Thomas, built my life, raised my children. I loved my family fiercely, and I found contentment in my life. But sometimes, in quiet moments, a pang of regret would surface, a wondering about the life I had chosen not to live, about the man I had left behind. My husband Thomas passed away 5 years ago, leaving a void in my life that time has softened but not erased. My children are grown, living their own busy lives. I had settled into a comfortable widowhood, my past feeling distant, a story I had already written. Then, a few months ago, I was helping my daughter, Sarah, clean out her attic. She had inherited some boxes from my parents' house when they passed, boxes I had never gone through. We were sorting through old papers, finding forgotten photographs and letters, piecing together fragments of my parents' lives. Tucked away at the bottom of a box labeled Mother's Correspondence, I found a bundle of letters tied with a faded green ribbon. They were addressed to my mother in handwriting I didn't immediately recognize. The return address was from a city far away, a city I knew Daniel had lived in for a time. My heart gave a little jump. As I read the first letter, the handwriting became clearer, the voice behind the words more familiar. The letters were from Daniel's mother, writing to my mother, years ago. The dates on the letters matched the time leading up to my decision, the time I was torn between Daniel and Thomas. They spoke of her son Daniel, of his plans to travel, his excitement about his future. But as I read on, the tone shifted. His mother wrote about Daniel being heartbroken, about his love for me, about his devastation when I chose Thomas. Then, in a letter dated just days before my wedding to Thomas, Daniel's mother wrote, "My dearest Eleanor," addressing my mother by her first name, which was Margaret, but using my name, Eleanor. Confusingly, I know this is difficult, but I feel I must reach out. Daniel is in such pain. He loves your Eleanor deeply. He understands the pressures, the expectations placed upon her, but he is lost without her. He has decided to go ahead with his plans to travel, but his heart is broken. He believes Eleanor's choice was solely her own, that she simply did not love him enough to defy expectation. But I know your family, Eleanor, and I know the subtle ways pressures can be applied. Please, if there is anything you can do, any word you can say, to let him know that her choice was perhaps not as simple as it seems. He carries this pain, this belief that he was not enough, and it is breaking my heart to see him suffer. He is leaving next week. Is there any way at all, for Eleanor to reach out before he goes? Just to say something? Anything to ease his pain. My hands trembled as I read those words. Your Eleanor. My mother's name was Margaret, not Eleanor. I was confused, but the content was clear. Daniel was in agony, believing my choice was a rejection of him, a sign that he wasn't enough. And his mother was pleading with my mother, with Margaret, to intervene, to somehow let Daniel know that my decision was more complex than it seemed, that there were pressures at play he didn't understand. And the crushing weight of the realization hit me. My mother, Margaret, had received this letter, this plea from Daniel's mother, asking her to intervene, to offer some small comfort, some explanation before Daniel left, heartbroken and believing he wasn't loved enough. What had she done? Had she spoken to me? Had she reached out to Daniel's mother? The letters from Daniel's mother stopped after that one. There were no replies from my mother in the box. Had my mother, in her desire for me to follow the path she envisioned, ignored this plea? Had she allowed Daniel to leave, carrying the pain of a misunderstanding, believing he wasn't enough? Had she, unknowingly or knowingly, sealed my fate, and perhaps Daniel's as well, by remaining silent? The confusion about the name lingered. Why did Daniel's mother address the letter to Eleanor? Unless her name was Eleanor. My birth mother's name was Eleanor. My adoptive mother was Margaret. Had Daniel's mother been writing to my birth mother? But why? My birth mother had no connection to Daniel, or to the life I lived with my adoptive parents. The confusion was immense. Chapter 2. The confusion surrounding the name in the letter. Daniel's mother addressing my adoptive mother, Margaret, as Eleanor, added a layer of mystery to an already profound revelation. Why would she use the wrong name? Was it a simple mistake, or was there something more to it? The letter itself was clear. Daniel's mother was writing to my mother, the woman who raised me, pleading with her to intervene with me, her daughter. The content was specific to my situation, my choice between Daniel and Thomas, my family's expectations. The possibility that my mother, Margaret, had received this heartfelt plea from Daniel's mother, asking her to ease his pain, to explain the complexities of my decision, and had chosen to do nothing, was a heavy realization. It felt like a betrayal, not just of Daniel, but of the love we shared, of the truth that could have offered him some comfort in his heartbreak. My mother had always been a woman who valued stability and reputation above all else. Her desire for me to follow a conventional path was deeply ingrained. It was possible that in her mind, any contact with Daniel, any acknowledgement of the depth of our connection or the pressures I faced, would only complicate things, perhaps even jeopardize my impending marriage to Thomas. Her silence, in her eyes, might have been a way of protecting me, of ensuring I stayed on the right path. But it had come at a cost to Daniel, and a cost to the truth of my own experience. The confusion about the name, however, continued to niggle at me. Why Eleanor? Unless a long dormant memory surfaced, a fragment from my childhood. Hearing my parents, my adoptive parents, refer to someone named Eleanor in hushed tones, a name associated with a past that seemed shrouded in a little secrecy. I had dismissed it as a relative I didn't know well, or perhaps a family friend. But now, coupled with the letter, the name Eleanor felt significant, connected to a hidden part of my family history. Could Eleanor be my birth mother? The woman I had never known, the subject of quiet conversations in my adoptive parents' home? Was it possible that Daniel's mother knew my birth mother, Eleanor, and had somehow confused her with my adoptive mother, Margaret? It seemed far-fetched, but the name in the letter, so clearly written, could not be ignored. I felt a growing need to understand the truth about Eleanor and her connection, if any, to Daniel and his mother. It felt like another layer of hidden history waiting to be uncovered, a secret that might shed more light on the complex circumstances surrounding my choice all those years ago. I started looking through my parents' belongings again, searching specifically for anything related to the name Eleanor. I found old documents, a birth certificate for me, listing my adoptive parents, Margaret and Arthur, as my parents. This was the document I had always known, but I also found a few scattered references in my mother's old address books and journals. A name, Eleanor Vance, with an address in a neighboring state, and occasional notes about visits or phone calls. Eleanor Vance. Was this the Eleanor? Was she my birth mother? The dates in the address books and journals aligned with the time before I was born. And the years of my early childhood, the visits and calls seemed consistent with a relationship that was perhaps distant, but still present in their lives. And then another startling discovery. Tucked away in a box of old photographs, I found a few older ones, dating back to the late 1950s or early 1960s. One photograph showed my adoptive mother, Margaret, with a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to her, clearly a sister, standing beside a handsome young man. On the back of the photo, in my mother's handwriting, were the names Margaret and Arthur, with Eleanor and Daniel. Eleanor and Daniel, together in a photograph with my adoptive parents. This wasn't Daniel from college. This was an earlier Daniel. And Eleanor, this young woman, my mother's sister, was named Eleanor. Was she the Eleanor in the letter? Was she Daniel's mother? My head was spinning. The narrative I had held for so long. The clear lines of my family history were becoming blurred, intertwined with secrets and hidden connections. If this Eleanor, my adoptive mother's sister, was Daniel's mother, and Daniel's mother wrote that letter to my adoptive mother, why did she refer to me as your Eleanor? Unless she was referring to herself as Eleanor, and to me as her Eleanor, her daughter. But that still didn't explain why she was writing to my adoptive mother about me. It was a tangled web of names, relationships, and hidden truths. The possibility emerged, terrifying and exhilarating, that my birth mother wasn't a stranger named Eleanor Vance, but my adoptive mother's sister, also named Eleanor, and that the Daniel in the photograph, the Daniel who was with her, was the same Daniel I had loved in college years later, and that Daniel was my half-brother. Chapter 3. The possibility that my adoptive mother's sister, Eleanor, was my birth mother, and that Daniel, the man I loved in college, was my half-brother, was a revelation so profound it shook me to my core. It explained the confusion in the letter. Daniel's mother, my birth mother, Eleanor, writing to my adoptive mother, her sister Margaret, about me, her daughter, her Eleanor. It also explained the photograph, showing my adoptive parents with Eleanor and Daniel long before I was born, a glimpse into a hidden family history. My life, the story I had told myself for 68 years, was suddenly irrevocably changed. My parents, the people who raised me, were my aunt and uncle. The woman I knew as my aunt, Eleanor, was my birth mother. And Daniel, the man who had been the great love of my youth, the path not taken, was my half-brother. The weight of this new truth was immense. A complex mixture of shock, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness for the life I never knew. The family connections that had been hidden from me for so long. My adoptive parents, Margaret and Arthur, had carried this secret throughout their lives, building a family on a foundation of silence and carefully constructed normalcy. Why had they done it? Why the deception? The only explanation that made sense, given the time period, was the societal stigma surrounding unmarried mothers. My birth mother, Eleanor, young and unmarried, must have faced immense pressure, leading to the difficult decision to give me up. And her sister, my adoptive mother, Margaret, and her husband, Arthur, must have stepped in, offering to raise me as their own, perhaps as a way to protect Eleanor from shame and to give me a stable home. The letter from Daniel's mother took on a new, heartbreaking meaning. It wasn't just a mother pleading for her son's emotional well-being. It was my birth mother, Eleanor, writing to her sister, my adoptive mother, Margaret, about her heartbroken son, my half-brother, Daniel, asking for a way to ease his pain, perhaps even hinting at the truth of our connection, hoping that somehow, before he left, something could be said or done. And my adoptive mother, Margaret, in her efforts to maintain the carefully guarded secret and ensure I stayed on the path she envisioned, had remained silent, allowing Daniel to leave, believing he wasn't enough, never knowing the complex truth of my choice, or that the woman he loved was his sister. The layers of secrecy, the unintended consequences of well-intentioned decisions, the missed connections. It was almost too much to bear. The regret I had carried for 40 years about the path not taken with Daniel was now intertwined with the pain of a lifetime of deception and a profound sadness for the intricate web of hidden relationships. I needed to understand the full story. Why was Daniel with my birth mother, Eleanor, in that photograph? What was their relationship then? And how did he end up being the man I met and loved in college years later? Was there a story about his father, a man I knew nothing about? My search for answers became a consuming need. I revisited my parents' belongings, looking for any more clues about Eleanor and Daniel, any hint of the circumstances surrounding my birth and Daniel's life. I found old family trees, carefully constructed by my mother, that omitted branches, creating a false narrative of our lineage. I also began researching Eleanor Vance. Using the address I found in my mother's address book, I searched for information about her. I found records indicating she had lived in that town for many years, obituaries, property records, small-town newspaper archives. They slowly pieced together a picture of a life lived quietly, away from our town. I also searched for information about Daniel Vance. It became clear that Daniel was indeed Eleanor's son, born a few years before me. The photograph of them together wasn't just a casual snapshot. It was a glimpse into their early lives, perhaps before Eleanor, my birth mother, faced the difficult circumstances that led to my adoption. But the connection between Daniel and my family, the reason he ended up in college in my town years later, where we met and fell in love, that remained a mystery. The more I uncovered, the more questions emerged. It felt like my entire life had been built on a foundation of secrets, a carefully constructed reality designed to protect a hidden truth. The regret for the path not taken with Daniel was now intertwined with a profound sadness for the man he was, the man I fell in love with, unknowingly my half-brother. The love we shared, so real and powerful at the time, was now seen through the prism of this devastating truth. Chapter 4. The weight of the newly uncovered truth about my birth mother, Eleanor, and my half-brother, Daniel, was immense. My adoptive parents, Margaret and Arthur, had loved me, raised me, given me a stable home, but they had also built my life on a foundation of secrecy. My birth mother, Eleanor, had made a difficult choice, entrusting me to her sister, and then seemingly lived a quiet life away from our town, carrying her own burdens and secrets. And Daniel, my half-brother, the man I loved in college, had been unknowingly intertwined in this complex web of hidden family connections. His heartbreak, fueled by a misunderstanding that could have been avoided had the truth been known. I felt a profound need to understand Daniel's story, the path his life had taken after he left, heartbroken and believing he wasn't enough. Where did he go? Did he find the adventure he craved? Did he ever find peace? And did he ever learn the truth about our connection? Finding Daniel after all these years, knowing what I now knew, was a daunting prospect. The relationship we had shared, seen through the lens of this new reality, was deeply complex and emotionally charged. But I felt compelled to reach out, to share the truth that had been hidden from both of us for so long, to offer some form of closure, perhaps even forgiveness, for a past neither of us fully understood. I started by trying to retrace his steps after he left town in the late 1970s. I searched for any records of his travels, any sign of the adventurous life he planned to live. It was a challenging search, given the time that had passed and the likelihood of him living a less conventional life. I also looked for any information about his father, my birth mother Eleanor's partner at the time. The family trees I found didn't mention a father for Daniel. Another layer of secrecy surrounding his origins. It seemed that part of the story was also hidden, perhaps deliberately, through online archives of college yearbooks and alumni directories from the time we were there. I found a few mentions of Daniel Vance, confirming his presence at the college during those years. This reinforced the connection between my birth mother's family name, Vance, and the Daniel I knew. My search eventually led me to a small art gallery website in a city far away, a city known for its vibrant art scene, the city where Daniel had mentioned wanting to live. The website listed upcoming exhibitions, and one name immediately caught my eye: Daniel Vance, showcasing a collection of photographs from his travels. Daniel Vance, the artist, the adventurer, the man I loved. He was still pursuing his passions, still living a life of exploration and creativity. And he was alive. The gallery website included an email address for the artist. My hand trembled as I composed the message. How do you explain to someone who was once the love of your life and whom you now believe to be your half-brother that you've uncovered a complex family secret that ties your lives together in a way neither of you could have ever imagined? I decided to be concise and direct while also being sensitive to the enormity of the information I was about to share. I introduced myself, mentioned our time together in college, and explained that I had recently uncovered some family history that suggested a significant, previously unknown connection between our families, a connection that related to his mother, Eleanor Vance, and my own family. I didn't reveal the full truth about being siblings immediately, wanting to gauge his reaction and provide the information in a way that he could process. I asked if he would be open to talking, to learning more about this hidden history. Sending the email was like stepping off a cliff. The uncertainty was immense. Would he respond? Would he be angry? Confused? Or would he be open to hearing about a past he knew nothing about? A past that fundamentally altered his understanding of his own life. Days turned into a week. No response. I braced myself for the possibility that he wouldn't reply, that the past would remain buried, and this new layer of truth would be mine alone to carry. Then late one evening, my phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, my heart pounding. Hello? Eleanor? Is that Eleanor? The voice was familiar, older, but with a hint of the same youthful energy I remembered. Daniel. Daniel? I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, it's Eleanor. I got your email, he said. His voice was cautious, filled with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. A hidden connection? With your family? My mother? Yes, Daniel, I said. It's a complex story. I've uncovered some family history that suggests a significant connection between us, related to your mother, Eleanor Vance, and to my family, the Davises. My mother never talked much about her past, he said, about her life before she raised me. It was always a bit of a mystery. There were secrets. Daniel, I said softly. Secrets kept for a long time, related to my birth and to your mother's life. "What kind of secrets, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice growing more insistent. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to share the truth, gently but fully. "Daniel," I said, "this is going to be a shock, but I've uncovered documents, letters, photographs. They reveal that your mother, Eleanor Vance, she was my birth mother, and it means you are my half-brother." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, bridging the miles between us, connecting two lives that had been unknowingly linked in the most profound way. Chapter 5. The silence on the phone felt endless, a void filled with the immensity of the truth I had just shared. Daniel, my half-brother, the man I had loved deeply in my youth, was grappling with a revelation that fundamentally altered his understanding of his own life, his own identity. Finally he spoke, his voice a low whisper of disbelief. "My birth mother was your mother? The woman who raised you?" "No, Daniel," I clarified, my voice gentle. "The woman who raised me, Margaret Davis, was my adoptive mother. She was your mother's sister. My birth mother was Eleanor Vance, your mother. Margaret was my aunt. Arthur, my adoptive father, was my uncle. They raised me as their own." I explained about the hidden compartment, the journals, the letters, the photographs, the pieces of the puzzle that had led me to this astonishing truth. I shared the story of my birth, the difficult circumstances, the decision for my adoptive parents to raise me, the layers of secrecy that had surrounded my life. Daniel listened, his initial shock giving way to a flood of questions, of emotions. He had known his mother, Eleanor, had a sister named Margaret, but he had lost touch with that side of the family years ago. He had known there were unanswered questions about his own origins, about his father, about his mother's past, but he had never imagined this. We talked for hours that night, and in many conversations that followed. We filled in the gaps in each other's lives, sharing the stories of the decades we had lived apart, unknowingly connected by blood and a shared hidden history. Daniel shared more about his life, his travels, his pursuit of art. He spoke about his mother, Eleanor, painting a picture of a woman who was creative and independent, but who also carried a quiet sadness, a restlessness that he had never fully understood until now. He also shared the pain of our breakup, the confusion and heartbreak he had felt, the belief that he hadn't been enough. I shared the letter from his mother to mine, the one I had found in my adoptive mother's box. Reading his mother's plea, knowing the truth behind her words, brought tears to his eyes. He finally understood that my choice had been complex, influenced by family pressures and circumstances he hadn't known about, and not a simple rejection of him. The love we had shared in college, seen through the lens of our sibling connection, was deeply complex. It wasn't a romantic love, not anymore, but a bond forged in youth, now understood as a connection of blood and shared destiny. It was a mix of tenderness, regret, and a strange sense of having known each other on a profound level, long before we knew the truth. The decision to reveal the truth about our connection was not without its challenges. There were difficult conversations to be had with my children, with Daniel's extended family. Unraveling decades of secrecy is rarely simple. But the need for truth, for both Daniel and me, was stronger than the fear of discomfort or disruption. Daniel came to visit. Meeting him in person, no longer as a lost love, but as a newly found sibling, was a deeply emotional experience. We looked at each other, seeing not just the echoes of our younger selves, but the faces of people connected by the most fundamental bond. We visited the places from our past, the college campus where we met, the cafe where we spent hours talking about our dreams, the park where we held hands and believed the world was ours for the taking. It was a bittersweet journey, acknowledging the life we thought we would have and embracing the unexpected reality of the lives we did live, now intertwined in a way neither of us could have ever imagined. Daniel and I built a relationship as siblings, a connection that felt both new and deeply familiar. We shared a bond that was unique, forged in the crucible of hidden history and unexpected revelation. We talked about our birth mother, Eleanor, trying to piece together her life story, the choices she made, the burdens she carried. We honored her memory, understanding that her decisions, though they created a lifetime of secrecy, were likely made out of love and a desire to protect us in a difficult world. The path not taken with Daniel, the adventurous life we dreamed of, was a life I didn't live. But the life I did live, the stable life with Thomas and my children, was a life filled with love and meaning. And now, the unexpected path I had walked, the path of uncovering hidden truths and finding a lost brother, had brought a different kind of richness, a sense of completeness that I hadn't realized I was missing. The letter from Daniel's mother, the confusion about the name Eleanor, the photograph, the buried secrets, they were all threads in a tapestry woven by fate, by the choices made in the past, and by the enduring power of truth to connect and heal. The regret for the path not taken remained, a quiet acknowledgement of a life unlived. But it was now softened by the profound joy of finding a lost sibling and understanding the complex, heartbreaking story that was the foundation of both our lives. My life was no longer defined by a single choice made at a fork in the road, but by the entire journey, including the hidden paths and the unexpected detours. A journey that ultimately led me to a deeper understanding of myself, my family, and the extraordinary ways lives can be intertwined by love, loss, and the enduring power of truth.